John Thornton here, allproblogger.com. The Bengals draft is over, so what do they do next? I'm going to look at each position group and kind of give an assessment of what I think should happen. Starting out with the quarterback position, the Bengals went out, they drafted Andy Dalton. From the sounds of everything, they feel like he's their guy. They feel like he may have a shot to start this season, depending on when the lockout ends. So they're very happy with that pick. I think that the Bengals need to sit down right now. They should be having meetings this week and discussing their options for other quarterbacks to help Andy Dalton. One of those options would obviously be Carson Palmer. I think Mike Brown needs to really just sit down and revisit his stance on the whole situation. Carson wants out. Mike Brown said he won't trade him. Now they went out and they sort of drafted a guy who they may feel like could be their next franchise guy. I've heard people say, well, Carson can come in and tutor this guy for a year, come in and play with the thought in mind that the Bengals would deal him after the season. I don't think that's a great move. I don't think that would happen. Number one, it's just been too much said. Carson's either has to come back and be the guy, or they have to really get rid of him. They have to honor his request for a trade. If I'm Mike Brown, this is what I'll do. I'll say, listen, I'll call Carson's agent, David Dunn, and say very quietly, if you can do this quietly, go out and see what's the best deal you can get from me. And I will assess it. I will sit down, I will look at it, I will give it serious consideration. If it's good compensation, the right team, I wouldn't send them to a team that I have to play a lot. So that comes, thinking about that, you think about teams like Seattle. Seattle still needs a quarterback. There's word that they won't sign Matt Hasselbeck, or they can't sign Matt Hasselbeck. They didn't draft a guy. They have Charlie Whitehurst there, who people don't know if he can really be the guy. So Seattle, Carson's former coach, and Pete Carroll. I think that's a good mix. It's on the West Coast. I think his family will be happy. San Francisco, I think, is still an option. They drafted Colin Kaepernick in the second round. They have Alex Smith as their returning starter. You don't know where his career is going to go. I think that's an option. I still think the Miami Dolphins, they didn't go out and address the quarterback situation in the draft. I think that's an option. Arizona is sort of tied to other quarterbacks like Mark Bolger. Matt Hasselbeck can go there since he knows the division. I don't know if Arizona would be the spot, but hey, they don't have a quarterback either, so that can be a spot as well. So there's teams out there that I think the Bengals can get good compensation in return, a very high draft pick for the 2012 season. So I think Mike Brown should at least sit down and explore that. And if he decides to let him retire, that's on them. If they want to let value just sit there, as it sounds like Carson can go either way. So the quarterback position is something they need to really settle down. And if Carson's not in the plans, then they need to go out and get a veteran quarterback to help Andy Dalton. If you look at what the Jets did a couple of years ago, they went out and they signed, they drafted Mark Sanchez with the 5th pick in the draft. They had, Brett Favre was just leaving. Kellen Clemens was the backup, and they let Mark Sanchez and Kellen Clemens battle it out for the starting job. Kellen Clemens had that job in the preseason, didn't play too well. Mark Sanchez did, a decent job against the Baltimore Ravens in the 3rd preseason game. Rex Ryan decided, hey, I'm going to go with the rookie, and he had Kellen Clemens as backup. Now, the only problem is Kellen Clemens didn't play a lot. So, he wasn't a real valuable tool to sort of mentor the young Mark Sanchez. And what the Jets did last year, they went out and got a Mark Brunell, a guy that really can't play much anymore other than a few plays or maybe start a game or two if there's an injury. But Mark Brunell brought a lot of calmness on the sideline. You saw him and Mark Sanchez really interact on training camp. And so, Mark was just like that second quarterback coach. Mark Brunell was to Mark Sanchez. So I think the Bengals should go and really get a guy who can come in here and accept his role as a backup and know that he's more of a quarterback coach. And if something happens, then he can get in the game. I think they can take that option. Or, they can go out. I think if they go out and get a guy that's trying to be the starter, a guy that really wants to revive his career, they're just going to have a hard time going out and get a guy like Vince Young, going out and get a guy like Matt Leinart to come in here, even a Mark Bolger. I think those guys want long-term deals. And when there's a young startup like Andy Dalton sitting in the wings, they know that their time is really going to be short. So I think they have to find a veteran quarterback to come in here and sort of help mold this guy. A guy like Jeff Garcia may even be an option because he's played in the West Coast offense. He's played in the in the Gruden system, so he may be a guy that they can look at. Next, the wide receiver. Drafting A.J. Green, I think he's automatically your big playmaker. I can see Jerome Simpson lining up on the outside. Had Jerome Simpson and Andre Caldwell fight for the number 2 job. Had those guys compete throughout the season. You don't really have to name a starter. These guys can play based on how well they're playing. I think that would be a good option. And obviously Jordan Shipley in the slot receiver with Jermaine Gresham at tight end. That's a good skill group right there for a young quarterback. So you got to decide what you want to do with Chad Ochocinco. Doesn't look like he's going to be back. So I think the longer they draw this out, you just don't want Chad to come back or feel like he's being held against his will or feel like Marvin's against him and they're making him come back. I just don't think you want that in the locker room with a young guy like A.J. Green here, the young Jerome Simpson, guys that sort of seem like they're growing up into their role. Like I said before, I still think Chad can play. I still think he would be helpful to this team if they would just commit to him or they both committed to each other. But it seems like now, like he wants out and, Marvin takes digs at him in the media. And, a lot of that stuff is funny. These guys have a great relationship, but I just think that it's sort of heading more toward divorce. So I think they need to really handle that sooner rather than later. Tight end position, they need a blocker. I don't know if they're going to bring Reggie Kelly back. They need a young guy. You got to see what Chase Kaufman is doing, but I still think they need to add a tight end to the mix. Offensive line, I've said it all offseason. I think they're going to come back with the starting lineup that they had last year. They really like Andrew Whitworth. They like Nate Livings. Kyle Cook is a young guy, very smart center. They like Bobby Williams in the last year of his contract. A big guy, didn't play great last year. That's probably why they drafted the young kid out of Georgia. And Andre Smith, you got to get his foot healthy. You got to start getting something out of your 6th pick from the 2009 draft. So offensive line, I think they're set. They have some guys behind them the last few years. They drafted Hudson, I think that was his name, in the 5th round last year and the kid in the 4th round this year. So those guys can really fill in the interior spots. Running back, Cedric Benson. You need to really, I think if they brought him back, that would be good. He knows the coaches. He doesn't know the system yet because it's new, but, he sort of knows the landscape around here. It wouldn't be like bringing a new guy in. I think Cedric would be their first option, depending on how much he wants to be paid. I think he deserves a big contract. If I'm the Bengals, I'm looking out there. I'm seeing a lot of veteran backs that could hit the market, guys that you can sort of play it against each other and say, hey, we have this deal on the table. It's short. If you want to come take it, it's a great opportunity. We're going to run the ball a lot. You can showcase your skills. So I don't think they have to overpay for a running back. They just need somebody, a power back, to come in here and run the ball 20 to 25 times a game. You have Bernard Scott that needs to get on the field more. So I don't think they have to overpay for that position. But Cedric Benson would be my first option. And if not, I'm going towards Ronnie Brown. You got a Ricky Williams out there. You got D'Angelo Williams and Carolina who may come through. You got a lot of guys out there that would be options. So I don't think they're necessarily tied to Cedric Benson. Flipping it over to the defensive side, the defensive line, even though they have a lot of people coming back, they got to really set their lineup. I think you got to decide between Carlos Dunlap and Robert Gathers. Robert Gathers is an old, reliable guy. He's not old. He's just been here a lot. I think he's still under 30. He's had some knee issues, but Robert gives you everything that he has. He's not a pass rusher from the outside. He's sort of better inside on 3rd downs pass rushing, but on 1st and 2nd down, he still plays the run pretty well. So you got to decide whether it's time to put Carlos Dunlap in full time, what to do with Robert. He's making good money. He's going to be a guy that you need this season, so you can't just get rid of him. But, I know what they tried to do with me in the latter part of my career, sort of. One time they came to me and said they may need to adjust my contract, make it more incentive based so they could keep another player, but that player left in free agency, and so they never adjusted my contract. So, maybe they do have with Robert, maybe they don't. They just keep him and let him play. I think the defensive tackle position, Doma Peko didn't have a strong year last year. He finished strong, but he didn't play strong all year. Pat Sims filled in for Tank Johnson. Pat played well. He had a couple of mishaps in the New Orleans Saints game, jumping off sides at the end. Coaches were upset with that. A couple of things in practice. They really wanted him to practice better. But he had a decent year, had a few sacks, got some pressure, played the run well. Geno Atkins was just a third down player, came in, got good pressure. So you really got to decide whether it's time for Geno to get more reps, and you got to decide who's going to be that other DT, or if it's going to be open competition for all of them. So, I don't think they keep all of those guys because you got a young Clint McDonald as the fifth DT. So you really need to set your lineup inside, and I think they all should really fight for their jobs. At the other defensive end, Michael Johnson filled in for Antoine Odom pretty well. Frosty Ruckers coming back off an injury, and a guy who I think is their best overall defensive lineman is Antoine Odom. You still have him under contract. If he's healthy, if he can get back to his 09 form before he tore his Achilles, that would be a plus because I definitely want him out there. So he may end up being your starter at right defensive end, with Michael Johnson filling in on either side. So I think they have some depth on the defensive line, but they're going to have to release a guy or two. I don't see him doing anything in free agency at that position. So they just really got to figure out the depth part of your defensive line and who's going to be a starter. The linebacker position, is Dhani Jones coming back? I think he should. I think he's still your best bet at Mike Backer to keep sort of everything safe out there, to make sure the calls come in right. He's still the smartest guy out there in the field. Yeah, Ray Maluga may be better physically. He can thump people a little more. But it's something to be said for guys that know what's going on. You look in Pittsburgh at James Ferrier, he's still out there doing it, even though he isn't the most physical guy. Ray Lewis isn't as physical as he used to be, but, he's a physical presence out there for his teammates. He's an inspiration. I think Dhani Jones fills that same role here, but at some point they're going to move Ray inside, and so you don't know if they're going to do it this year. The outside linebacker position is wide open. I don't think Keith Rivers or Brandon Johnson, you don't know which one of those guys are going to start. You think the nod goes to Keith Rivers. He's a ninth pick from a couple years ago. But you haven't seen the big plays out of Keith yet. So Brandon Johnson may be open for a starting job. You got the rookie in there, Dante Moak. I don't think he'll be a factor early on. It's too much to learn. He'll be a third down guy. So they really have to decide, Keith or Brandon, Ray or Dhani, and what to do with the third down guy. And in the secondary, your corners are set. I really believe they'll sign Jonathan Joseph back. If they let him go, I think they're going to be hurting. I don't know if Pac-Man Jones can come back from his neck injury. Morgan Trent is really just a slot guy, play on the third down, can't really play on the outside. Brandon Gee from last year, I think that's how you pronounce his last name. He really didn't impress last year either. So I think they'll be hurting. Leon Hall really needs a stud corner on the other side to do what he does best. So they need Jonathan Joseph back. He's a guy that I really would try to sign, and you got to pay him big money. The safety position, Roy and Chris Crocker are solid veterans. They just get beat up a lot. Bringing in Robert Sands is going to really up the competition. I think he can help out. But if they stay set at the safety position, I can do that for another year. I would be okay with Roy and Chris Crocker. Both are big hitters. You just know at some point in the season, one of them is going to get hurt, and you need and Chinadu's hurt this year as well. He's coming off of a knee injury. I don't know if he'll be back in time. So bringing in Robert Sands was a good move. I really like that move. That's one of my favorite moves that they made in the draft, even though he's from my school. I'm not saying it because he's from West Virginia, but I think he's a good enough player to contribute. So the Bengals have some moves to make. I think they kept a lot of guys on this roster just to give them a built-in smokescreen for the draft. A lot of teams like the Jets, they released a lot of players. It's right before the lockout happened. You see the Saints release Jeremy Shockey. You just seen guys all over the league get released. The Bengals didn't do it. They kept a lot of guys on their roster. So now, whenever free agency opens up, they can release a couple of guys or not sign a few guys back, and then maybe go out there and dink and dunk in free agency to sort of make this team complete. Because right now, they have a good roster, but they still need to upgrade in a couple positions. So that's where I see the Bengals at right now. In the beginning of May is very incomplete because I still think a few moves need to be made. The biggest one is at the quarterback spot because if you're going to turn this team over to a rookie quarterback, that has to be known early. And, I think that they have to let the team know because that gives the team a mindset like, listen, we're going to run the ball. We're going to play good defense. We're going to have a rookie quarterback. Take our shots when we can, but we all have to do better. And believe me, when your starting quarterback isn't out there, it's not the same feeling on your team because when Carson Palmer was out in 2008, sometimes you get into games and things go bad. You just like, man, we know we're not going to come back, and that's the feeling that we had at times in 2008. Even if you're playing well, you just like, we just don't have the firepower to win. So if the team has that mindset early on that we're going to have a rookie, we all need to step up and we're going to play a certain way, I think that would help this team.